The speedometer read 45 miles per hour when everything changed. Tommy Radcliffe had driven coal trucks through Pike County for 23 years without incident. He knew every curve, every pothole, every place where the road narrowed to nothing. His daddy drove these same routes before him. His granddaddy helped build them back in the 30s. But nothing in 3 generations of mountain driving prepared him for what stepped onto Highway 194 that October night. It moved into his headlights like something out of a fever dream. 7 feet tall, maybe more, covered head to toe in matted gray fur that looked silver in the high beams, but it was the eyes that froze his blood. They reflected light like a coyote's, that greenish-yellow glow, except they held something a coyote's eyes never could: intelligence, recognition, understanding. The creature didn't bolt like a deer or freeze like a possum. It turned its massive head and looked directly at Tommy through the windshield. Look at him the way another person looks at you, with intent, with awareness, with something that felt uncomfortably close to judgment. Tommy's foot slammed the brake pedal to the floor. The truck's engine roared in protest. 60,000 pounds of vehicle and coal screamed down the asphalt in a controlled crash. The trailer whipped sideways, jackknifing across both lanes. The smell of burning rubber filled the cab. The squealing of locked tires echoed off the mountain ridges on both sides of the road. And through all of it, through the chaos and the noise and the terror, that thing just stood there, watching, waiting. 3 seconds. That's how long it held his gaze. 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Then, without any rush or panic, it stepped backward. Not turned around, not run. It walked backward into the tree line, moving with a grace and fluidity that something that massive had no right to possess. Within 2 steps, it vanished completely into the darkness, as if the mountain itself had swallowed it whole. State police found Tommy 2 hours later, still in the driver's seat. Both hands locked on the steering wheel in a death grip. Engine running, high beams cutting through empty roads. His eyes were open, but he wasn't seeing anything in front of him. When Trooper Marcus Daniels tapped on the window, Tommy didn't respond. Didn't blink, didn't move. They had to pry his fingers off the wheel one by one. The skid marks behind his truck stretched 87 feet down the highway. The investigating officers measured them twice to be sure. Whatever Tommy Radcliffe saw that night broke something fundamental in him. He sold his rig 3 weeks later and moved to Florida. His wife told people he was retiring. His friends knew different. You don't retire from fear. You run from it. But here's what makes Tommy's story more than just another scared driver on a dark road. He wasn't the first. Not by a long shot. He wasn't even the first that year. What he encountered in those 3 seconds has been walking these mountains for over a century. Local people have a name for it. They call it the Hillbilly Beast. And if you think that sounds like folklore or campfire stories, you've never stood in these hollows at dusk and felt something watching you from the ridgeline. You've never heard the sounds that echo through these valleys on autumn nights. You've never seen the tracks. Let me tell you about the place where this happens. Eastern Kentucky isn't like other parts of America. It exists in its own reality, operated by its own rules. This is the western edge of the Appalachian Mountains, where ancient ridges cut the land into deep valleys that haven't seen sunlight in a million years. Black coal seams run through rock older than human memory. Pike County alone covers over 788 square miles. Most of it is forest. Dense, tangled, impenetrable forest that swallows sound and light and people who don't respect what they're walking into. You want to understand why something could hide here? Try this. Pull out your phone in half of Pike County and watch it search uselessly for a signal. Drive 10 minutes off the main highway and realize your GPS stopped working 3 turns ago. Walk into the Daniel Boone National Forest, which protects over 700,000 acres of wilderness, and understand that protected doesn't mean mapped. It doesn't mean explored. It sure as hell doesn't mean understood. Between the National Forest and the Big South Fork area, you've got nearly 1 million acres where a person could disappear and never be found. Now imagine something that doesn't want to be found. Something smart enough to avoid the few trails we've cut through the green. Something that knows these mountains better than we ever will. The roads here don't go straight because they can't. They twist through passes so narrow that when 2 coal trucks meet, one has to back up half a mile to let the other through. Some valleys are so deep and so shadowed that moss grows on both sides of the trees. The hollows, that's what locals call them, Hollers snake between ridges with names like Dead Mare Branch, Devil's Creek, and Troublesome. Those names didn't come from romantic imagination. They came from hard experiences, from learning that these mountains give nothing easily and take everything they can. Families here have roots that go down as deep as the coal seams. Hatfield, McCoy, Maynard, Justice, names that are legend and history and current residents all at once. 8 generations in the same valley. 8 generations of stories about what lives in the high places where the ridges touch the clouds. 8 generations of warnings about going into certain hollers after dark. You think that's superstition? Ask yourself why superstition survives 8 generations. Ask yourself what keeps a story alive for 200 years. The coal industry changed everything starting in the 1880s. Railroads punched through mountains. Company towns sprouted like mushrooms after rain. Immigrants poured in from Italy, Poland, Hungary, all of Eastern Europe, chasing jobs underground. At its peak, Pike County had 15,000 men working the mines. 15,000 men with electric lights and dynamite and the arrogance of the industrial age. They thought they were conquering the mountains. They were wrong. Because even at the height of the boom, even when mine shafts ran for miles under the surface and company towns dotted every valley, huge swathes of land stayed wild, stayed untouched, stayed exactly as they'd been for 10,000 years. Today, the mines are mostly gone. The company towns are ghost towns. Nature is taking back what was always hers. But the wild places, they never left. They were just waiting. And something was waiting for them. The first written account comes from April of 1893, not a campfire story, not an oral tradition, a documented report filed by a professional surveyor named William Mundy. He was working for a timber company, marking land for purchase near the Floyd-Pike County line. His job was to map property boundaries, measure elevations, and assess tree density. Basic surveying work he'd done 100 times before. His journal from that expedition sits in the Kentucky Historical Society archives. Anyone can read it. Anyone can see the entry from April 19th written in handwriting that gets shakier as the passage continues. Mundy wrote about the morning his crew came across something in a clearing. The creature stood upright like a man, but was covered all over in gray-brown hair. When Matthews shot his rifle in the air to scare it, the thing screamed so loud every horse went crazy. It ran up the ridge faster than any man could move, using its arms to pull itself up the steep parts. We left the site immediately. I told the company the land was unsuitable for logging due to terrain difficulties. I did not tell them the real reason. The timber company never built there. The land stayed wild. Mundy's journal includes a sketch, rough but detailed enough to be disturbing. The proportions are wrong for a bear. The posture is wrong for a man. It's something caught between. Something that shouldn't exist but clearly impressed itself firmly enough in Mundy's mind that he felt compelled to document it. Professional consequences be damned. Stories accumulated during the coal boom years like sediment at the bottom of a river. Night shift miners at Elkhorn No. 3 reported strange calls echoing through abandoned mine shafts. Calls that weren't quite human but too complex, too structured to be animal. They described it as sounding like language spoken in a voice box that wasn't built for language. In 1921, a train engineer named Thomas Gilliam filed an official report with the Louisville and Nashville Railroad. He encountered something on the tracks near Hellier that forced him to engage the emergency brake system. His written statement is preserved in railroad archives. The language is matter-of-fact, almost clinical, which makes it more unsettling. Taller than any man I ever saw, covered in fur like a bear but walking on 2 legs with purpose and coordination. It looked directly at me through the cab window before walking into the woods. I have worked on this line for 16 years. I know what bears look like. This was not a bear. The railroad marked his report as classified. It never reached the public, but it stayed in their files, gathering dust alongside a dozen similar reports from other engineers, other conductors, other railway workers who saw something on those mountain tracks that couldn't be explained away. The 1930s brought the Great Depression and federal work programs. The Civilian Conservation Corps sent crews into the mountains to build trails, plant trees, and create infrastructure in wilderness areas. These weren't superstitious locals. These were young men from cities, from farms in the Midwest, from places where folklore meant nothing. But they learned quickly. Work crews started calling it the Gray Devil. The National Archives have their reports, filed under mundane headings like work delays and site complications. Read between the bureaucratic lines and you find fear. One supervisor, James Harlan, wrote to his regional director about an entire crew refusing to return to a work site near Fishtrap Lake. They found footprints, he wrote, footprints that measured 16 inches long with 5 distinct toes. The men are not hysterical or prone to superstition, but they are adamant. I went to the site myself. I saw the tracks. I saw where tools had been moved during the night, arranged in ways that suggest curiosity rather than random animal disturbance. I cannot in good conscience order men back to that location without additional information about what we are dealing with. Harlan included sketches. The prints show 5 toes, clear heel definition, and a stride length of nearly 6 feet. Bears have 4 toes. Bears don't walk in straight lines for hundreds of yards. Bears don't arrange tools in neat rows like they're trying to understand human purpose. But all of this, all these scattered reports and filed documents and archived journals, they're just preamble, background. The event that changed everything, that made the Hillbilly Beast more than folklore, happened in September of 1954 in a place called Greasy Creek. The Sykes family became the center of the most documented, most investigated, most impossible to dismiss case in eastern Kentucky history. Vernon Sykes was nobody special. That's important. He wasn't looking for attention, wasn't trying to sell books or get on television. He was a tobacco farmer working land his father had worked and his grandfather before that. 40 acres on Greasy Creek. A 2-story house built in 1892. A wife named Patricia. 4 kids, the oldest being Margaret, who was 13. The nearest neighbor lived half a mile away. The nearest town was Pikeville, a 30-minute drive on roads that turned to mud when it rained. The Sykes family lived quiet lives in a place where quiet was the default. Until September, it started small. Dogs disappearing, not running off, which dogs do. Not getting into fights with wild animals, which happens. Disappearing. Vernon had 3 hunting dogs, good stock, kept on heavy chains in the yard. One morning he went out to feed them and found 2 chains empty, broken, not unclasped or chewed through, broken. The metal links snapped clean like someone had cut them with bolt cutters, except the breaks weren't clean cuts. They were twisted, wrenched, torn apart with force that Vernon couldn't make sense of. He showed the chains to his brother-in-law, Carl Morrison, who happened to be a Pike County deputy sheriff. Carl looked at those broken chains and didn't say much, but he took them with him, had them looked at by people who understood metallurgy and breaking points. The report came back with numbers Vernon didn't fully understand, but Carl explained real clearly. Whatever broke those chains exerted over 1,800 pounds of force. That's not a bear. That's not a person. That's something else. September 15th changed everything. Patricia woke at 2:30 in the morning to their milk cow screaming, not bellowing, screaming. There's a sound cows make when they're terrified, when something trips the deepest panic switch in their animal brain. Patricia had grown up around livestock. She'd never heard a cow make that sound before. She shook Vernon awake. He grabbed his shotgun and went outside, thinking a black bear was trying to get into the barn. Black bears were common. Black bears were understandable. What he found was different. The cow stood in the far corner of the pasture, pressed against the fence so hard the posts were bending, shaking, eyes rolling, making that sound. In the middle of the field, lit by bright September moonlight, stood something Vernon's brain couldn't process. Shaped like a man, but wrong in every proportion, 7 feet tall at least, maybe more. Grey-brown fur covered its entire body, arms that hung past its knees, shoulders broader than any man Vernon had ever seen. The head was large, pointed at the top, with a face that Vernon couldn't quite see but could feel looking back at him. It stood there, just stood there, watching the house, watching Vernon, for maybe 30 seconds. Vernon raised the shotgun but couldn't make his finger pull the trigger, couldn't make his body obey the simple command to shoot. Later, he'd say it was like the thing knew he had the gun and didn't care. Like it understood what guns were and had calculated that Vernon wasn't going to fire. After half a minute that felt like half an hour, the creature turned. Not quickly, not startled. It just decided it was done and walked away, into the tree line. Moving with long, steady, purposeful steps. It didn't crash through the brush like a spooked animal. It just walked into the darkness and disappeared. Vernon stayed awake until dawn. When the sun came up, he searched the field, found tracks. Deep tracks, pressed into earth that had been dry and hard. He called Carl immediately. Carl came with another deputy and equipment to make plaster casts. What they found measured 15.5 inches long, 7 inches wide at the front. 5 toes, clear toe prints with what looked like nail marks at the tips. The stride between prints measured 6 feet. They made 3 good casts, documented everything with photographs and written measurements. Carl packaged them carefully and sent them to the University of Kentucky's anthropology department with a detailed letter explaining the circumstances. The casts were lost, not misplaced, lost. The university claimed they never arrived. The Postal Service had no record of lost packages. Carl Morrison kept copies of the sending receipt until he died in 2003. His daughter still has them. The casts vanished into bureaucratic nowhere, and the official record acted like they never existed. Vernon sent Patricia and the kids to stay with her sister in Pikeville. He thought whatever it was had moved on. He thought wrong. 3 nights later, it came back. Vernon heard something on the porch around midnight. Heavy footsteps. The boards creaking under weight weren't built to support. He went to the window and saw it, standing on the porch, looking at the door, just looking, like it was thinking, like it was deciding. Vernon shouted, fired a warning shot through the window. The thing dropped to all fours and ran, but not in panic. It ran like it had accomplished what it came to do, like it was testing something. The family came back after a week. Patricia didn't want to, but the farm needed work, and they couldn't afford to stay in town indefinitely. That's when the real horror started. Margaret's bedroom was on the 2nd floor. Corner room with 2 windows, one facing the yard, one facing the woods. She started waking up in the middle of the night to see something at her window. A huge shape standing on the porch roof, looking in. Its face pressed close to the glass. She'd scream for her father. By the time Vernon got to her room with the shotgun, it would be gone. But they'd hear the porch roof creaking, hear something heavy moving across the shingles, hear it climb down, because it never jumped. It climbed down carefully, like it didn't want to break anything, like it was being considerate. This happened 16 times in 2 months. 16 times Margaret woke up to that thing at her window. 16 times it watched her sleep. A 13-year-old girl being stalked by something that shouldn't exist. The psychological impact was devastating. Margaret stopped sleeping. I started having panic attacks. Lost 15 pounds because she couldn't keep food down. Patricia and Vernon tried everything. Hung bells on the porch roof so they'd hear it climbing up. It worked around the bells. Nailed the bedroom window shut. It just looked through the glass anyway. Called Carl Morrison to stake out the house. The nights Carl was there, nothing happened. The thing knew. It knew when someone was waiting with a gun and when the family was alone. After 2 months, Vernon made the hardest decision of his life. They left, packed up in the middle of the night, and drove to Ohio, abandoned a farm that had been in the Sykes family for 3 generations, left everything behind. The house sat empty for 17 years until it burned down in 1971, under circumstances the fire marshal ruled as undetermined origin. Margaret Sykes, now Margaret Collins, finally talked about her experience in 2006 for a documentary that never aired. The funding fell through, they said, but the interview footage exists. You can find clips online if you know where to look. In them, Margaret, now in her 60s, still tears up talking about those nights, still describes the face at her window with precision that 50 years hasn't dulled. It wasn't trying to scare me, she says. It was curious, like it wanted to understand what I was. That's what made it so terrible. It was too smart, too deliberate. If it had just been an animal, I could have processed it. But I was thinking. It was studying me. The Sykes case broke something open. Suddenly, people who'd stayed quiet for years started talking, sharing experiences they'd kept private, out of fear of ridicule. Mary Thacker from Elkhorn City told about finding her smokehouse door torn off its hinges, 30 pounds of cured ham gone, Prints in the dirt like nothing she'd seen in 40 years of mountain living. Clyde Dameron admitted he ran a moonshine still up on Pine Mountain, illegal but tolerated. Something large circled his operation at night. Stayed just outside the lantern light. Never attacked, never stole anything. Just watched. It wanted me to know it was there, Clyde said. Like it was curious what I was cooking. Like it was learning. A pattern emerged when you laid all the sightings on a map. Dale Hutchinson saw it. He was a conservation officer who worked in Pike County for 30 years starting in 1978. Smart guy, educated, not prone to believing things without evidence. But he kept hearing these stories, keep seeing the consistency. So on his own time, using his own money, he started documenting, interviewing witnesses, recording details, taking measurements. His widow donated his files to Marshall University after he died in 2008. They contain over 200 sighting reports collected over 3 decades. Hutchinson did something nobody else had done. He standardized the interview process, asked the same questions the same way, separated what people actually saw from what they thought they saw, eliminated obvious hoaxes and misidentifications. When he was done filtering, he had 147 encounters he considered credible, and those encounters clustered. The ridges above Fishtrap Lake, old mining camps near Hellier, deep valleys feeding into the Russell Fork River. These locations shared characteristics: remote, water access, natural shelter, lots of old mine shafts that went unmapped and unexplored. The physical descriptions matched across decades from witnesses who never met each other. Height estimates between 6.5 and 8 feet. Weight estimates between 400 and 600 pounds. Everyone who got close described the same pointed head shape, the same forward-leaning walk, the same mixture of ape and human features, the same unsettling intelligence in the eyes. That last part showed up in nearly every interview. The eyes weren't animal eyes. They held awareness. They held thought. Hutchinson believed something real was out there. He staked his professional reputation on it in a paper he tried to publish in 1993. The paper was rejected by every scientific journal he submitted to. Not because the research was bad, because the conclusion was impossible. Science doesn't have room for impossible things, even when impossible things leave footprints. Speaking of footprints, Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum got involved in 1995. Meldrum studies primate locomotion at Idaho State University. Real scientist. Peer-reviewed publications, the kind of credentials that make dismissing him uncomfortable for skeptics. He analyzed photos of tracks found near Breaks Interstate Park. His findings, published in a small cryptozoology journal that mainstream science pretends doesn't exist, were fascinating and disturbing. The tracks showed proper weight distribution, flexible foot structure with visible toe movement, dermal ridges like fingerprints but on the sole of the foot. If these tracks are fakes, Meldrum wrote, whoever made them has an expert understanding of primate foot anatomy and movement biomechanics. They understand how weight transfers from heel to toe. They understand how the foot flexes and grips on sloped terrain. Creating convincing fake tracks of this quality would require more expertise than most professional anthropologists possess. The alternative explanation is that these tracks are real. Both possibilities are equally unsettling. The bear theory gets trotted out constantly. Bears can stand 7 feet tall on hind legs. In poor light from a distance, terror could transform a bear into a monster. Except bears don't have 5-toed human-like prints. Bears don't walk bipedally for extended distances. It's possible for short stretches, but bears tire quickly when upright. They certainly don't run on 2 legs or climb cliffs vertically while bipedal. And people in eastern Kentucky know bears. They've lived alongside them for generations. They hunt them. They've encountered them in the woods countless times. Would they really mistake a bear for something else? Would trained conservation officers mistake a bear? Would engineers and miners and farmers all make the same identification error across 130 years? Some researchers propose feral humans. During the Civil War, deserters from both armies hid in these mountains. Some never came out, survived, had children. Those children had children. Generations of humans living wild might explain bipedal movement and intelligence. But it doesn't explain size. It doesn't explain the fur. It doesn't explain strength sufficient to break logging chains or carry full-grown deer for miles. Feral humans would still be humans, bound by human physical limitations. What's being described exceeds those limitations dramatically. The mine shaft theory has merit, though. Eastern Kentucky has thousands of abandoned coal mines. Many aren't mapped. Some go miles underground, connecting with natural cave systems. Deep mines maintain stable temperatures around 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. Water seeps through, creating underground streams. If a small population of unknown primates discovered this network, they could live there indefinitely, protected from weather, hidden from discovery, coming out only at night to forage. The timing supports this. Sightings spike in late summer and early fall when nuts, berries, and fruits ripen. When calories are abundant and easy to gather, the creatures could stock up, then retreat underground for winter. It explains why winter sightings are rare but significant. January 1991 brought one of those rare winter encounters. An ice storm knocked out power across half the county. Dennis Hall worked for the power company, trying to restore electricity near Beaver Creek. His truck got stuck on an icy uphill slope. He was attaching chains to the tires when something massive walked out of the trees. Dennis described it as over 7 feet tall, covered in thick gray fur with ice crystals hanging from it like living frost. It looked at him. I looked at the stuck truck, then walked behind the vehicle. Dennis felt the truck rock as something pushed. The vehicle lurched forward onto level ground. When Dennis turned around, the creature was walking back into the forest. Didn't wait for thanks, didn't linger, just helped and left. Dennis never filed an official report. Told co-workers the story for years. Most laughed. Some didn't. A few quietly shared their own experiences. The story spread, became part of the local legend. But what makes Dennis's encounter remarkable isn't just the sighting. It's the behavior. The creature assessed the situation, understood the problem, and provided assistance. That's not animal behavior. That's not instinct. That's empathy. That's problem solving. That's something we don't have words for because science says it shouldn't exist. Children see it differently than adults. That's a pattern that emerges if you dig into the accounts. In 1999, 8-year-old Katie Morrison was playing in her backyard near Drift when she saw what she called the big hairy man watching her from the woods. Her mother heard her laughing and came outside expecting to find Katie with an imaginary friend. Instead, Katie was waving toward the tree line. "There, the big hairy man," she said. I waved and he waved back. Her mother saw nothing. But she found prints later. Huge prints pressed into the soft earth at the forest edge, exactly where Katie had been waving. Similar stories appear throughout the records. Children describe the creature as curious but shy. Sometimes they find small gifts left where they play. Unusual stones, perfect hawk feathers, arrangements of acorns in geometric patterns. It's like the creature understands that children are less threatening. Or maybe children are less threatened because they haven't learned yet to fear impossible things. They just accept what they see and respond honestly. No weapons, no aggression, just a wave and a smile. And sometimes apparently that's enough for a wave in return. The intelligence indicators pile up if you're paying attention. Trail cameras started becoming common in the early 2000s. Hunters put them everywhere to track deer patterns. Sometimes they caught other things, or rather they didn't catch them, which is the point. Hunters noticed that once a trail camera appeared in a specific spot, the creature seemed to avoid that exact area. The cameras would catch everything else. Deer, bear, raccoons, even the occasional bobcat. But the humanoid shape that had been leaving prints, gone. It understood what cameras were, understood what they did, changed its behavior accordingly. Multiple reports describe tool use. Branches used to knock fruit from high limbs. Rocks used to crack open logs for insect larvae. One highway construction crew near Jenkins in 2007 experienced something that still freaks out the foreman when you ask him about it. They were widening Route 23. Equipment kept getting moved at night. Survey stakes pulled up and thrown into the woods. Orange safety cones stacked in pyramids. One morning, the bulldozer keys were missing. The operator's seat was adjusted all the way back, like someone much taller had sat there. Muddy handprints on the controls measured over 9 inches across. The foreman, Bill Tackett, installed security cameras. They were destroyed the first night, smashed deliberately. He tried hiding cameras farther away. Those got destroyed too. Not stolen, destroyed, ripped from their mounts and crushed. Whatever was doing it understood cause and effect. Understood that cameras meant observation, Didn't want to be observed. The message was crystal clear. We see what you're doing. Stop. The crew finished the work only during daylight hours, with someone always watching the equipment. Nothing else was touched. That level of intelligence raises profound questions. Questions science doesn't want to address, because addressing them means acknowledging something that shouldn't be real. But the evidence keeps accumulating. The audio recordings alone are worth examining. Hunters and researchers have captured hundreds of hours of potential vocalizations, deep resonant calls that carry for miles, high-pitched screams that echo off ridges, wood-knocking patterns that seem to convey information. Audio analysis reveals frequencies below human hearing range. Infrasound, the kind whales use to communicate across oceans. If a breeding population exists, scattered across hundreds of square miles, infrasound would allow coordination without the vulnerability of close proximity. The Ohio howl, recorded in 1994 just across the border from Pike County, remains one of the clearest examples. 4 minutes of complex vocalizations that linguists who analyzed it said show patterns consistent with communication, not simple animal calls. There's structure, there's repetition with variation. There's what sounds like responses to environmental sounds, like the creature is commenting on what it hears. We can't translate it, but we can recognize it as more than random noise. In 2012, college students camping near Russell Fork River recorded something they still can't explain. They were sitting around their fire talking when calls started coming from across the water. Deep whooping sounds. The students recorded 40 minutes on a phone. When they talked, the calls changed. When they were quiet, the calls stopped. One student tried howling back as a joke. The response was immediate, closer, aggressive, something throwing rocks that splashed in the river near their camp. The students left. Smart decision. Tommy Bowling, an amateur researcher, spent 6 months in 2014 documenting wood knocks near Shelby Creek. He found patterns, 3 knocks in specific rhythms. When he knocked back using the same rhythm, he sometimes got responses, different rhythms, like a conversation in percussion. One night after a long exchange, something threw a rock that landed 10 feet from his tent. Hard throw. Deliberate placement. The message was clear. Stop copying us. Tommy stopped. Also smart. The physical evidence frustrates everyone. Despite thousands of people carrying high-quality cameras in their phones, clear images remain elusive. The few photos that exist are blurry, distant, partially obscured. Skeptics point to this as proof of hoax. If it's real, why no clear photos? The counter-argument is that the creature has learned to avoid open spaces during daylight. It moves through dense cover. It's active primarily at night, when phone cameras perform poorly. And perhaps most importantly, it understands what cameras are and actively avoids them. Recent thermal drone surveys of Daniel Boone National Forest detected something interesting. The surveys weren't looking for cryptids. They were tracking deer populations, but their data, analyzed by thermal imaging experts, showed at least 3 instances of bipedal heat signatures in areas where no humans should have been. The signatures appeared at night in remote sectors. They moved through terrain too rough for casual hikers. They were large, significantly larger than human heat signatures. The Forest Service was asked about these findings. They declined to comment. Dogs won't track it. That's a pattern hunters noticed decades ago. Hunting dogs that will corner bears or chase wild boar refuse to follow the Hillbilly Beast scent. Professional hunter Jake Mullins documented this extensively starting in 2001. His bloodhounds are champion trackers. They've found lost children, tracked wounded deer for miles, never back down from any animal. But when they pick up the beast's scent, they stop. Whine, tuck tails, run back to him. Mullins has seen this happen dozens of times. He's found fresh tracks ahead on trails his dogs refuse to follow. Something in that scent triggers primal terror in canines. They recognize a super predator, an apex threat, something their instincts scream to avoid at any cost. Dr. Alan Steinberg works in the emergency room in Prestonsburg. He's treated 3 patients over the years with injuries they attribute to Hillbilly Beast encounters. Medical privacy laws prevent him from giving details, but speaking generally, he describes a consistency in wound patterns that's difficult to dismiss. Claw marks in sets of 4, spaced wider than bear claws, with a distinctive curved pattern. Not deep injuries, more like warnings, like the creature was saying back off without trying to kill. One patient, speaking anonymously, described being pushed down an embankment after surprising the creature near his deer stand. "It didn't attack," he said, "just shoved me out of its way and kept going. But the strength was incredible, like being hit by a linebacker made of concrete." Game wardens tell stories off the record they'd never repeat officially. Several describe finding deer kills that don't match typical predator patterns. The carcasses are carried significant distances from the kill site. The consumption pattern focuses on organ meat and bone marrow, leaving muscle tissue largely intact. This selective feeding suggests nutritional awareness beyond typical carnivore behavior. It also explains why the creature might risk approaching human settlements. Our garbage provides easy access to high-calorie foods without the energy expenditure of hunting. Why chase deer when humans leave out buffets every week in plastic bags? Weather patterns might influence sightings too. Statistical analysis shows encounters spike before major storm systems. Barometric pressure changes could trigger movement or feeding behavior. Animals often behave strangely before storms. They sense pressure changes, electromagnetic shifts. If the Hillbilly Beast is a relic population from prehistoric times, it might retain behavioral patterns from different climate conditions. Ancient responses to weather patterns we no longer recognize. This could explain why sightings seem random, but actually follow rhythms older than recorded history. The preservation challenge haunts serious researchers. Without a body, skeleton, or even one clear photograph, scientific recognition remains impossible. But if someone did find remains, what then? The legal implications are staggering. Would it be protected under the Endangered Species Act? Would its habitat receive federal protection? The economic impact on coal mining, logging, and development could reach billions. Some suggest this explains official reluctance to acknowledge evidence. The cost of recognition might simply be too high. Easier to dismiss it as folklore than deal with the consequences of confirmation. Specific locations generate repeated encounters. Window Rock, a natural arch near the Virginia border, features in multiple accounts. Witnesses describe seeing the creature silhouetted against the sky at dawn, surveying the valley below like a king watching his domain. The Redbird River Valley, with its maze of abandoned coal camps, generates consistent reports. Troublesome Creek has its own cluster of sightings. These locations share characteristics: remote water access, natural shelter, limited human traffic, perfect habitat for something that wants to remain hidden. The intersection with other mysteries intrigues some researchers. Eastern Kentucky has disproportionate UFO sightings, mysterious lights, other unexplained phenomena. The Collins family of Letcher County reported both Hillbilly Beast sightings and strange lights on the same property over multiple years. Statistical correlation doesn't prove causation, but the overlap deserves investigation. Maybe these mountains attract weirdness. Maybe there's something about the geology, the magnetic fields, the isolation that creates conditions where unlikely things become possible. Technology advances offer new research opportunities. Environmental DNA sampling could detect unknown organisms without direct observation. You collect water, soil, and air samples. Extract DNA, compare it against databases. If something unknown lives there, its DNA will be in the environment. Satellite imagery might reveal movement patterns invisible from ground level. Artificial intelligence could analyze thousands of hours of audio and video, identifying anomalies human observers miss. But technology also enables better hoaxes, making verification even more challenging. The fundamental question persists: if the Hillbilly Beast exists, why haven't we found definitive proof? The answer might lie in the vastness of eastern Kentucky's wilderness. People unfamiliar with the region underestimate how remote these mountains remain. Hollows exist that haven't seen human footsteps in decades. Mine shafts penetrate mountains in networks no one has fully mapped. If something intelligent wants to avoid detection, the terrain provides every advantage. Add in intelligence. Add in caution learned over generations of human encounters. Add in possible underground habitat that keeps them hidden most of the time. Suddenly, the lack of proof doesn't seem like evidence of absence. It seems like evidence of successful hiding. In 2021, something happened that shook even the staunchest skeptics in the local community. Reverend Douglas Combs, a Baptist minister who'd preached in Pike County for 30 years, had an encounter that challenged everything he believed. He was driving home from a revival meeting near Hindman around 11 p.m. Route 80 was empty, which was normal for that time of night. He came around a curve and saw something in his headlights that made him hit the brakes hard enough to lock up the tires. The creature crossed the road right in front of him, not rushing, not spooked by the car, just crossing. It turned its head to look at him as it passed through the high beams. Reverend Combs describes that look as the moment his faith and his understanding of creation collided. "I've preached against evolution my whole life," he said in a recorded interview that his congregation asked him not to publish. "I've taught literal six-day creation. I've told people that science is wrong about the age of Earth and the development of species. But what I saw makes me question everything. It wasn't human. It wasn't an animal. But somehow both. It moved with purpose and awareness that spoke of intelligence, of consciousness, of something that thinks and understands. I don't know what it was, but I know it exists, and I know I don't have an answer for it anymore." His congregation remains divided. Some support him, some think he's mentally unstable, some think he saw something but misunderstood what it was. The encounter cost him his certainty. That's what he says now. "For 30 years I had certainty. Now I have questions." Maybe that's closer to the truth anyway. Raymond Littlecrow would agree. He's a Cherokee elder who returned to ancestral lands in eastern Kentucky after spending most of his life in Oklahoma. His people were forcibly removed from these mountains in the 1830s during the Trail of Tears. But memory persists. Oral traditions persist. Stories about the Nunyunuwi, the beings covered in hair that live in the high mountains. Those stories stayed alive through generations of exile. Raymond speaks carefully about these matters. "Your word cryptid assumes it's hiding," he says. "Maybe it just exists in spaces your worldview doesn't include." My people understood that reality has layers. Some things exist in the physical world. Some things exist in the spirit world. Some things move between them. We didn't try to prove or disprove. We just knew to respect certain places. I knew not to go to certain places at certain times. Knew to leave offerings and not take too much from the land. The Nunyunuwi were here before us. They'll be here after us. Whether science acknowledges them or not doesn't change that truth. Western science struggles with that perspective. Science demands proof, demands reproducible evidence, demands that phenomena fit into existing frameworks. But what happens when something doesn't fit? When something exists outside the framework? Do we expand the framework or deny its existence? History suggests we usually choose denial first. We denied meteorites came from space because rocks can't fall from the sky. We denied plate tectonics because continents can't move. We denied quantum entanglement because particles can't communicate faster than light. Eventually, evidence overwhelms denial. The question is, how much evidence is enough? For the Hillbilly Beast, the evidence keeps accumulating. Every autumn, when leaves turn and air grows crisp, new reports come in. Every year, people who never believed see something that changes their minds. Every generation adds to the documented accounts, the footprints, the photographs, the audio recordings, the encounters that can't be explained away. Tommy Radcliffe never recovered. The truck driver from our opening. He lives in a small apartment in Fort Lauderdale now. Works as a security guard at a shopping mall. Never drive at night. Never go into wooded areas. His wife divorced him because she couldn't handle the nightmares, the insomnia, the way he'd jump at sudden sounds. He lost his career, his marriage, his peace of mind, all because of 3 seconds of eye contact with something that shouldn't exist. But others keep searching, keep watching, keep hoping for the evidence that will transform legend into scientific fact. They venture into hollows most people never knew existed. They place trail cameras in locations determined by decades of sightings. They record sounds that don't match any known animal. They find tracks that shouldn't be there. And sometimes, in the gray light before dawn or the purple dusk of evening, they see something that changes their understanding of what these mountains contain. Something tall, something powerful, something undeniably intelligent. Watching them from the edge of the forest, something that shouldn't exist but somehow does. Moving through the Kentucky mountains with the confidence of a creature that knows it belongs here more than we ever will. The search continues, driven by those who've seen what conventional science says is impossible. Each new encounter adds to a growing body of evidence that something extraordinary inhabits the hollows and ridges of eastern Kentucky. Whether that something will ever step fully into the light of Scientific recognition remains unknown. For now, it remains what it has always been, a mystery walking upright through the mountain shadows, leaving only footprints, recordings, and questions in its wake. Questions that challenge our understanding of what's possible. Questions that suggest the world still holds secrets in its wild places. Questions that perhaps we're not yet ready to answer. The mountains keep their secrets. They always have. And maybe, just maybe, some secrets are meant to stay that way. Hidden in the hollows, walking the ridgelines at dawn, watching us from the dark places where our lights don't reach, reminding us that for all our technology and science and certainty, there are still things in this world that exist beyond our understanding. Still mysteries worth respecting. Still places where the impossible might just be real.